Hello, Dr. Cruz Almeida. Please pardon the background. I am at work. So I was thinking about what to do for my final project, what case study to choose from, and I would like to choose a case study that's kind of like a little bit on the sad side, a little bit dramatic, impactful because it is dealing with pediatric patient. So this patient, he's about 12 or 14 now, and he is interesting to me because he was born a neurotypical child, and after a traumatic brain injury involving a car accident with his mother that was driving under the influence of heroin, he suffered brain damage, permanent brain damage to I'm not sure what lobe, but he suffered permanent brain damage and is now considered a child with cerebral palsy. So besides the fact that this is kind of like unusual situation where the child was born neurotypical and now has permanent brain damage, it also kind of piques my interest because the child not only exhibits, the delays and all that you would expect with a traumatic brain injury, but he also exhibits a lot of neuropsychological problems because it seems as though he still remembers what his life was like, before this injury. So he's a child with a lot of depression and behavioral disorders and all of that, even though they essentially, according to his diagnosis, he really doesn't understand where he is or kind of what's going on around him, but he does, and he shows depression and anger and anxiety that other children with cerebral palsy that were born with cerebral palsy and didn't have this trauma, didn't become brain damaged because of trauma, were just simply born that way. Those children don't exhibit what this child does. So I think it kind of has, a little bit of the different aspects, not only the, anatomical aspect of what happened to him and what areas were affected, and I could talk about that, but also the neuropsychological aspects of his, decline in cognitive processes and behavioral abnormalities that we see in him. He lives in a residential home. It's called the Hattie Lardham Foundation here in Ohio, and it's a foundation for children with disabilities. And that's kind of how I would structure my final project. It's kind of, a brief synopsis of his story and what happened to him, what areas of the brain were affected, and what changes we could have expected from that. What is his diagnosis now? What is his functionality like, what he can and cannot do, his limitations, and then kind of delve into the psychological aspect of how he was affected, and as well as, his relationship with his family, like the whole social aspect of his mom going to jail and, little sister that was also in the car. And anyway, it's a tragic story, but I think it will serve as an interesting project, an interesting presentation. I don't know if you think it's too much, so there are certainly other people that I can choose from, maybe adults or something that's not as sensitive. So I greatly appreciate your feedback. Let me know what you think.